my name's Crystal. They want a title. Let's go with Madam Butterfly.
Why a title is Madam Butterfly?
Because the butterfly means hope and life.
What was the biggest trigger for you to start this charity and the stories involved in creation of this charity?
You know, it was something that I always one day said to my blue dot, one day you're going to mean more to me than cancer.
Before we get started, please subscribe so that you never miss an episode of our cutting-edge contemporary conversations. Thank you. Welcome, Crystal. How are you?
Very good. Thank you, Dev, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. And the first thing which picked up my eye when I was looking you up on LinkedIn was Madam Butterfly.
Yeah.
And I thought there was a show in town called Madam Butterfly. And I was confused what it is. And I would want you to tell me more why a title is Madam Butterfly.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit of an interesting one, a bit of a fun one, really, because, you know, anyone who starts a business, you know, they like you to be a director or a CEO and have that title. And that's in the corporate world. And I thought starting something like a charity, you don't really need to have that. So I was out with some friends one night and we were talking about my dream and what I wanted to do at that stage. You know, the charity wasn't formed, the name wasn't decided. But I said I wanted the symbol to be the butterfly because the butterfly means change, endurance, hope and life. And my friend's daughter was there. She was only 21 at the time. And we talked about websites and she was studying that at uni. So she said, I could do your website for you. And I said, fantastic. So then we talked about different other things. And then she said, I said, what about social media? Because I'm not very good with all that. She said, I can help you with that with Facebook and all that. And I said, you could be our social butterfly. And then I said, maybe we could have like events butterflies and do that. And I said, well, I don't know, where does that leave me? And then I went, Madam Butterfly. And they laughed. And since then, I've spoken to different people with setting it up with lawyers. And every time I say that, everyone laughs. And I think, what does it matter? What does it matter with the title, you know? So that's how I became Madam Butterfly.
What's in the name?
In the name?
What's in the name?
Yeah, well, that's right.
That's the whole, you know, idea. What's in the name?
Yeah. So, I mean, my name's Crystal. They want a title. Let's go with Madam Butterfly.
And then, funny enough, you're wearing a scarf with butterflies on it.
I thought I would do that just to match. And let me tell you something I did.
Oh, dear. Okay.
A little tattoo.
Lovely.
During the startup and the very stressful things and times where I thought, what are you doing? You've never been in this space. Why are you doing this? But it just took me back to the people and why I kept doing it. So I ended up going in and getting a little tattoo and cried like a baby, kept saying, don't hurt me, as all these men were there getting tattooed like completely from top to bottom. And I've got my hand like this. And then in the end he said, it's all done. And I went, okay then. So that's my little sign for me.
Or a reminder.
Well. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, is it like, before I go on your organization, leading up to the creation of the organization, how has your life been like? And what has happened in terms of the evolution of your own life as a butterfly? Evolution in terms of, you know, from the young age to now, to then. And then how has the purpose and your value systems evolved?
Great question. I grew up with, you know, mum and dad, 6 kids. Mum didn't drive, dad drove, so we never really went anywhere as a family, as in travelled, even in the car, because we couldn't all fit in one car. So we spent a lot of our youth together. We lived in a no-through road, so we played out on the street with all the kids up the street, all that sort of thing. And we had a great life. We are very, very lucky in that our family is not really like a family. We're more like friends. So we still hang out together. In fact, 2 of my sisters are my neighbours. So we built our own retirement village. We knocked down one house and said, when we all grow up and get old and divorced and married and wherever, let's go back and live together, but not together in the same house. So we've done that. So we're very, very lucky from that side. So, you know, the values that we have, we're just very family orientated, looking after people, helping out when people needed it, was part of that. And I suppose growing up was the same thing, and you seem to create friends with similar values that come into your life. So been blessed with that. For me, the background work-wise has been over 30 years in tourism, working in airlines, hotels and customer service. So it's always been about exciting things, fun things. Things do go wrong, but when they go wrong, you fix it as best as you can. And part of my journey was my last corporate job. I was managing a team of about 65 people, I suppose. And was during that time that I had my cancer diagnosis, which threw me into this completely different world. And I was shocked and saddened by so many things that I heard and saw with people going through their journey who were often not from Perth, would be travelling from lots of places, and they were alone, scared, frightened, panicking about parking costs, all those sort of things that we did. And it was really fascinating for me coming from an industry of that to an industry of, it's life-changing for anyone to have that cancer diagnosis. So that was sort of where I met people, heard their stories, and thought surely there must be an easy way of putting all those learnings of what I've had in that industry into this world. And that's kind of how it all started.
Wow. What was the biggest trigger for you to start this charity and the stories involved in creation of this charity? And if you can talk more the core purpose of the organization as well.
Yeah, it was funny because after my radiation treatment, which I got smashed around pretty badly, as most people do, and it was probably about 5 weeks after I finished my treatment that I was called in to say that myself and the whole team were going to be made redundant, and I had to manage that process. So it was a 9-month process. It went through, we got through that, and at the end of it I had tried to relocate as many people into new job roles and all the rest of it. And at the end of it I thought, what am I going to do? Because I had been offered other jobs and I could pick up another job, but I thought if I go back into that corporate world, what I'd been in that year before and made the vow to do something to change the experience for people would never happen. Some of the stories of people in the waiting rooms were what really drew me to looking to do something different. I remember when I had the recall to go back for tests and there was all these white chairs lined up. In a corporate world, white or any chairs lined up in a room, you often wait for a person to come into the front and speak to you. But that never happened. It was just filled with everyone waiting to be called into the next, test, and then another test and another test and another test. It was then when I was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I hadn't eaten anything, hadn't drunk anything, because I thought I was only going to be there for like half an hour or something. And I'd been there since 7 o'clock in the morning, and I started to realise that there were less and less people, and I thought, how come? And then by the end of the day, there was probably half a dozen of us left in that waiting room, and I went in for a final test, and the test was horrific, and it was noisy, and you could hear it. And when I came out, I was stunned, and I had to have this machine go through where the potential cancer was 5 times. It sort of smashed into it, and I was like, came out. When I went and sat back down again, and you could hear more because there were less people in the room, and I saw this woman come out, and I heard, while she was in there, this machine going about 13 or 14 times.
Goodness.
So when she walked out, we just locked eyes, and I just shook my head, and I heard someone say, you have to do something to change this. And I didn't realise that was actually my voice out loud. And so it always made an impression on me that I needed to do something. I heard people saying they wouldn't have treatment because they wouldn't want to be away from their young families for any length of time, particularly if they lived remotely from Perth. People told me they were sleeping in their cars because they couldn't afford accommodation. And people saying, I'm not going to do it because I'm too frightened. Or people who lived in the regions said, I can't drive to Perth. Perth scares me, it's too big. And it was those stories that I was absolutely shocked, coming from like a hospitality world. So that was when the decision came and the role finished in the corporate world. And I thought, what can I do to keep myself viable, but to explore whatever it was that I wanted to create, I suppose. So I did something I didn't want to do. And that was I started a travel agency. And I thought that kept me into the world that I know and love, tourism and hospitality. So I started that. Any business takes a few years to sort of get going. Did that at the time. I think I was working 8 jobs, so different casual jobs to just keep the money flowing, but to keep building whatever this dream was. So eventually when I was ready to start the dream, I thought I could do it via the travel agency. I thought that if I did something that was about well-being and people's well-being, it would come from that. So I went and saw a business advisor, talked about my story, and I remember him sitting there with pad and pen, and it never moved at all because I'd put it in saying I want to relaunch and rebrand my travel agency. And so he said to me, a travel agent is a travel agent. And I said, right. So then he said, what do you want to do? So I started to tell him some of the stories of the people I met in the waiting rooms and my passion for wanting to do something, and I didn't know what. And he said to me, your stories are what will get you going. So go home and get a website with your name. And I said, I have to be honest, I'm really just another person who's had another cancer journey. And I don't mean that in any whatever way, but I'm not anyone with a name. So why would that work? So I said to him, well, I probably could do something about Blue Dot. And he said, what's that? And I said, Blue Dot is the tattoo you're given when you have traditional radiation treatment. That's how they line you up exactly every day that you have to go in for treatment. And I said, although my Blue Dot is really quite small, in my world when I had it, it was the biggest thing out. It was the size of the globe because you see it every day. It changes everything. It brings in emotions that you've probably never had before. And, it was something that I always one day said to my Blue Dot, one day you're going to mean more to me than cancer. And so he said to me that day, you go home and you start that business today. So I went home and created the name, and Blue Dot had gone. So I added Army because I thought it will take an army of people to support people and to help change this, the cancer experience. So that was how Blue Dot Army was born.
Wow. It's a lovely story. And as with so much stories, it became a name, Blue Dot Army, and the dot meant to you so much. And in the starting phase, what were the initial learnings, or how were you fine-tuning the values and the purpose of the organization? Because I think that's what people know and understand an organization from, and specifically within the charity sector, which where you play. How has that evolved and how has that crystallized?
Yeah, it's a great question because I have never worked in the not-for-profit space. And so when I went and saw this business advisor and I said to him, because he said, you have to start this whole new thing. And I said, I wasn't sure if I wanted to report to a board, whether to be a charity. He pick the people, hand choose the people that will help you follow the dream. He said, it's your dream, your experience. Decide what you need in this new world, what you want it to be and how you want it to work, and get them to do the journey with you. So that was really great. I sat down, nutted out a few things, and I thought I wanted it to be very much like from a tourism and hospitality space in that caring for people, road mapping their itinerary, if you want to call it, but obviously it's not an itinerary like going to Europe, but helping people in a non-medical way. How do you do that? So the first thing I did was engage with a friend who I'd met who'd worked in the not-for-profit space for many, many years and sat and talked about my dream and my vision of how I wanted to change the cancer experience. So she came along for the ride. The other thing you need is your accountant. So I asked my sister, she's a CPA. So she does the accounting. I then spoke to a HR friend, lady, because I thought you need to make sure you have all your policies and procedures and foundations set before you start something. From there, I wanted to do events. I wanted to do something different so that it wasn't just constantly asking for money for this or that, but for someone. It's like when you go out for dinner. If you go out for dinner, you've had a great meal, it might cost you a bit of money. You don't mind because it's a fair exchange. So if you do something and put a bit of fun into someone's life and they pay for a little bit of it, they don't mind that. So we have an events person, we have a strategy person, and also a customer experience designer. So it was about getting the people right to pick up the dream and work with that. So all their values are the same, and can I tell you, every one of them are still on the board today.
Lovely.
Yeah, and so I think that's what helps, is that we all align, and well, we have lots of fun doing it as well.
And what are the things you are focusing on in terms of projects and events?
So with the projects, we did start, we do an annual fundraising for change event. When I first started, it's, you know, like all these other board members are working full time. So you know that things are going to move very slowly, which was a real challenge for me, I have to say, because I'm one of those people, if I kind of want something, I want it now. So I have learned a lot of patience over the time, frustration with the learnings, because so many...
I call it character building.
Yeah, it's a really good way of putting it, Dev. Yeah, character building. Well, I've got a great character then, because it's been built over the 7 years. And it's really fascinating to think that there really isn't an individual body in the Cancer Network that you can go to say, hey, I've got this dream and I want to start this. What do I do? It was like bits of everything, bits of government, bits of this, bits of everything. That was a real struggle. So there was no one place to go, what do I need to do? And all of a sudden you find out, you know, if you're going to be a charity, then you can apply for this DGR status, and it's just all this learnings was incredible. So the name was launched in 2018 in September. 2019, I spent the whole year, and that sounds a lot, but it was because of access to people, trying to do other jobs, etc., doing all the policies, procedures, foundations. What does it look like? What do volunteers look like? What do we actually want people to do? And what I didn't want to do was start with bricks and mortar, because I thought you're paying rent, you're paying all these things, so you're basically trying to raise funds to support that. So I started in my own car, and for the first sort of, well, we really kicked off in 2020 supporting people. And I don't know if you remember, but there was another little thing that happened in the world called a pandemic that sort of started around the same time. So that was a challenge, to say the least, character building and trying to help people. So we did have people coming from the eastern states to come to Perth to have treatment. We work with a provider here at this point in time until probably only a couple of weeks away. There's a particular radiation machine that's only in Perth. So people were travelling from around the country to come to Perth. So during COVID, it was, you know, having to do the mandatory isolation before we could do anything. So it was my car on my own, and I wanted to see what this was going to be like. And I called it Conversations in the Car. And, you know, that was the thing that made such a difference to people. By the time they walked into the treatment area,
they've been trained, they've been, you know,
but they've connected with you at a different level, you know, as a human being, just talking about all sorts of different things. So they're not so stressed, they're relaxed. And I've even had one organisation say they can tell the difference of people that come to them versus the people that go through Blue Dot. Usually we might be telling a dirty joke or something like that. But anyway, we're laughing. But what we often find is I don't know the type of cancer that people have. That's not what we need to know. As a human, it's like, what do you need? Do you need accommodation? Do you need transport to your hotel? Have you been to Perth before? Let's show you around some of the highlights of Perth, and we connect with them as people. And that's been the huge difference. So no bricks and mortar. The goal was, the dream was after 18 months of me doing that on my own was to get a car, because then that meant if we got a car, I could get more volunteers, we could help more people. So we're very fortunate to have received a wonderful donation, and we got our first car donated by a man named Brian. So needless to say, the car's name is Brian. So Brian came to our little army and joined us a couple of years ago, and that made a huge difference. So for my first 4 years basically of doing it solo, I think the number of people that I supported or changed the cancer experience for, whether it was sourcing accommodation, taking them to their appointment, was something like 69. We then got Brian on board in the July, which was fantastic. The following year, a girl decided to walk the Bibbulmun track in honour of her father, who passed from prostate cancer. And when I met her, I said she needed something tangible to work towards that big goal of doing, 7.5 week walk. And I said, look, we hadn't had the car then, but I said, once we get one, having a second car would just be amazing. So that was her thing. And she sort of went a bit strange. And I said to her, what just happened to you? And she said, when I took my dad to one of his cancer treatments, she said, we stopped to let the Cancer Council bus go past. And he said to her, if I get through this, he said, I want to come back and I want to take people to their appointments. And I said to her, well, he will. I said, because I will paint your dad's name on the car. And then I said, actually, maybe we should find out what your dad's name is first. And she said, his name is Gary, but his friends called him Gazza. So I said, that's perfect. So she did that walk. We raised some extra money at our fundraising. And Gazza has now joined our army, and he has his own little number plate. And so the big thing for us was to do that. So since having the two boys join the army and extra volunteers on board, up until the 30th of June, just passed, we've just hit 374 people that we have changed the cancer experience for. So by having those two vehicles has made a huge difference to us. So that was always the strategy, to do that first. And now our little aim is to work on trying to get some bricks and mortar so that we can then bring the collective together.
I think you need to add some girls in your army.
Oh, we do have girls. We have lots of female volunteers. Well, all right, okay, I'll tell you.
The girls are driving.
Yeah, well, they do the driving. We do have a male driver, but we do have a lovely lady that a few months ago came up to me at a class on a Monday morning, and she said to me, are you Crystal? And I said, yes. And she said, this is 8:30 in the morning on a Monday. No coffee yet, Dev? None. And she said, did you start that charity, Blue Dot Army? And I said, yes. And she said, oh, I've just upgraded my car. She said, I just wanted to know if you'd like my old car. And I said, oh. And of course I'm shocked, right? No coffee, nothing. And I said, what's your name? Because I actually didn't even know her name. And she's already gifting me a car. And she said, Leanne. So I said, oh, so I'm trying to do my exercises thinking, what just happened? And at the end I said to her, we've got two boys in our little fleet. So I said, maybe we should have a girl and we could call it after you. And she said, look, she's got 200,000 on the clock. She's 20-something years old. She's just a little runaround. So I said, well, it's okay, I can call her Leah. And she said, well, it's probably not really a car name, but she said, my surname is Meldrum. So we'd called her Molly. So we do have a girl in the fleet.
Lovely stories. Yeah. I think so powerful stories to hear, and then very human experience.
Yeah.
And very normal human experience. Nothing to say that somebody has to have very powerful and then big, top of the mountain, winning, and that has to be a story. But it's just general acts of fulfillment and acts of giving. It's so powerful. I would like you to talk more on those 69 people you drove around, and I think from an outsider point of view, people might not understand the value of picking and dropping off, or having that conversation leading up to your first chemo, or all that it takes place through the cancer journey. I want you to tell the story through your conversations and then some stories you had with the 69 people you supported.
Oh gosh, there's so many of them. They were just amazing. Our first one was Andy, who came over from Cairns. Fantastic guy. Like I said, he had to isolate and all that. And, it's always the story around the cancer journey. So living in Queensland, he was a carer for his wife at the time, and he had a lot of other personal things. And, of course, he gets a cancer journey. But still very, active, very considerate of everybody else, and all the struggles he had, they were quite real. And he had to then source people to look after his wife while he came to Perth to have treatment. She was on her own and she didn't understand why she was on her own. So there was all those things that happened around that one. Following him, we had a young boy who was 9 with a brain tumour. There's some government assistance for people who live more than 100 kilometres from Perth if they need to travel to Perth for treatment. However, this boy didn't live outside the 100 kilometres, so there was no financial assistance, and that meant he couldn't stay at Ronald McDonald House. However, the social worker was concerned in an emergency that he wouldn't make it if he needed to come back to Perth. So through relationships and partnerships, there's something we have, because being in the travel industry, we've put hotels on board that are just so flexible and understand why we're doing what we do. So talking with the hotel manager, they just said straight up, they've got a room for 6 months. Whatever they need, if they need it. So when I went and met Mum at the Children's Hospital, it was something, you wouldn't want to stay in a hotel for 6 months. We got that. But the first thing, to be able to walk in front of a woman who was just completely zoned out because she's got so much going on, 3 other children in her world, having to go up and back every day, young child in hospital. And I said to her, I just want to tell you that you and your son are safe, and that if you need this option, we have this, and we'll organise, to have people take you to your appointments and things. Bigger story in a lot of that, as there often is, but in the end, he ended up with meningitis and was treated as an inpatient in the hospital. That still meant that Mum's still having a bit of a rough old time, and so I went into the hospital a couple of times and just met with her and just said, right, we're just going to go downstairs and have a cuppa, so I'd just sit with her. She'd tell me a lot of the other struggles, and I said, how are the kids at home, their learnings, and there was other things that she had to have in place. So then when it was time for him to be able to potentially go home, I went and picked her up and I said, I want you for 2 hours. And she said, I said, 2 hours, that's all I'm asking for. So I went and picked her up from the hospital. I took her to lunch and I took her to one of those little shopping centres, and I said, you're going in there, you put your phone down and you're going to go and have a head, neck and shoulder massage for half an hour. And she said to me, I've actually had a headache for the last 3 days. She was having lots of Nurofen. I said, well, then go in there. So she went in there, then we went out to Food Bank, and as we walked around Food Bank, I said, tell me about your other 3 kids and tell me what they liked. So everything they liked, whether it was, lemonade and stuff like that, everything went into the trolley. And then I drove her back to the hospital, packed all the food into her car to sort of send her home. So sometimes for us, it's the person having the treatment we may not be able to necessarily do something for in that situation. But for Mum, she was just that, for that little glint of a time, that 2 hours.
Respite.
It was time for her. And she was constantly on the phone, travelling, like coaching the kids, getting them to do stuff. It was just, a long thing for her. Another beautiful lady, she was from Toowoomba, Toowoomba. And she came over probably 4 or 5 times. She had a 1 in a million diagnosis of this particular cancer. Two children, 2 boys, and her youngest boy, Down syndrome. And so she fought hard. She said, I just want to stay alive to make sure I can see my youngest boy, 14 at the time, into assisted living in Queensland. So, and she said, I want to see my oldest son get married. So one time she came over for treatment, went home, saw her son get married, which was wonderful, and then came back and she had so much that, setting up, carers and all sorts of things for her younger son. And sadly, she passed in March last year, and I was really quite taken with that one, because I thought she really wanted to get to December, because that's when her son was 18. And I remember the next day I was really flat, and I was going to the chiropractor, and I got in my car at home, drove to the chiropractor, had my treatment, came out, got in the car, and I looked at the dashboard, and there was this little ladybug on the dashboard, and I was like, is that you, Jen? And it came to me, and it occurred to me straight away that she had actually put everything in place. Although she may not have physically seen him go into the assisted living, she had everything in place that she needed to do. So that was wonderful. I guess moving forward to somebody more recently, at the end of last year, in fact it was in September, I had a phone call from a lady to tell me that her husband, they'd just come out of the doctors, and her husband had been given 1 week to live. And they were from Bathurst in New South Wales, and they had made the decision to come to Perth to have the treatment here, to just give them a bit of extra time. So they came over, and we had a few volunteers and cars, and then some of their family came over. So both cars were out, Brian and Gazza at the markets with them. We were taking them out, showing them around. And after he'd had a bit of treatment, he was really unwell in the beginning, but after a bit of treatment, I rang them up and I said to them, I'm just checking if you're up for maybe going out for dinner, because I hadn't seen them for a while. And they said, yeah, we'd love to. So I took them out to dinner to a little place that I knew didn't have too many people around, rather quiet. And they were due to go home on the Sunday. And I said to them, well, all I can say is you two must be a bit popular with all the volunteers. And I said, because I put a shout out to see who wanted to get up at 7 o'clock in the morning to come and pick this couple up to take them back to the airport for their flight home. And I said, 3 volunteers put their hand up. And I said, so I have to disappoint at least one, because 5 of them wouldn't fit in our little car with luggage. And the wife said to me, oh, I think we could do that. She said, Art's only got like a small bag, and he's got, I've got my bag, and he's got his ukulele. And I said to him, oh, a ukulele? And I said, do you play? And he said, well, I actually play guitar, he said, back home, but I didn't bring any. So he said, I thought I'd get one and just sort of do a little bit. And so I said to him, oh, I said, do you do like jam sessions? Me knowing music. And he said, yeah, he said, we do an open mic. And I said, oh, okay, like I knew what that meant. And I said, one of my other dreams, I said, I'd just love to have a song or something that kind of just reflected who we are and what we do at Blue Dot Army. He goes, oh, really? He said, give me an idea of what you want to do. And I said, and his wife said to me, I'll play you a song that he wrote for us when we got married. So I said, oh, okay. So driving them back to their hotel, and Rachel puts the music on, and I'm listening, and I was like, wow. And I looked at Arthur and I said, that's good. And he's like, oh, thanks. So anyway, we're driving along a bit further, and then I said to him, is that you singing? He goes, yeah. And I went, you're like really good. And he goes, oh, thanks very much. So I get home and Googled him. He's only been singing and playing guitar in New South Wales for like 38 years or something. Anyway, so the next day I get a text message from him, and he said to me, the boys are in. And he went home Sunday. By Tuesday, he sent the first draft of a song that he and 3 of his mates put together about Blue Dot Army. And they finished that song and produced and recorded it with their friends, and they sent through some of the snippets, where the guys just stopped because they were emotional. And we now have a song which starts off with, sitting in the waiting room all alone, all those things that happen to people, but that they're not alone because we're with them. So, and it was an amazing time for me, because we'd FaceTime, and he and Rachel were on, the thing that they played the music to me, because all of us are, a dribbling mess. And I said to him, this is the most beautiful thing that you could ever do for me. And I said, this will be your legacy. And he said, yeah, I know. And I said to him, can I play this song at our lunch, in November? He said yes. So then I rang him back later and I said to him, I've got a better idea. How about we FaceTime live the actual song, and then you can have some people over there as well. So we did that. So we connected for that time. And, sadly, he passed on the 4th of January this year.
Mm.
But to have that sort of connection with someone.
Continuity.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Very powerful.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess really that's the difference of what we do. So most of the time, like I said, I don't even know the different areas. He had multiple cancers. I don't know what they were.
Mm-hmm. I think, as you said very clearly, is more of the human connection or human story you are, and trying to support people through the process rather than what cancer you have.
Yeah.
That is immaterial.
Well, that's relevant. They have those conversations with the medical professionals. That's not us. If you need one girl, I remember another girl during she was in the early stages as well, and she came over and she was having a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
She was just having a tough day. And I'd just check in every so often when I was doing it on my own, and I just said, just checking in, how are you today? She said, nope, not good. I was like, oh, okay then. Anything I can do? No. I need some peaches and I can't get them. I'm not well enough and I'm not going to go and get them. And I said, I could go and get them for you. What sort of peaches? No, I'm a pain in the neck. It has to be a certain type of peach, and and she was just annoyed with the world. So I said, okay then. So I went down to the local Coles, FaceTimed her from the peaches aisle. It's like, is it any one of these? And she's like, oh my God, here it is, there's the peaches. And I went, right, they're on their way. So I just took them to the hotel, said to concierge, can you get this up to her room as soon as possible? By the time I got home, there's a photo, her smiling, eating her peaches. Yeah.
Fun stories. And from that 69 stories you had, and then 300 plus, if you have to join the story together, all of those stories together, from a thread of resilience, the journey, the discovery of discovering new challenges every day, how do you see that? What's the commonality across all these 300 plus stories?
Wow, it's just, I think for me, it is the fact that when someone is told you've got cancer, your world stops. And to then know that there is somebody else out there who will not so much hassle you or be with you or tell you what you have to do, but to just be there when you need someone. And particularly when you're not from Perth, a lot of people from the north, the south, wherever it is, and families that do have to be split at that time is really tough. For me, it's just showing kindness and just letting people know. Like we say, we don't take your decision making away from you. And it's interesting, if I go back to the way I feel the charity is set up, it's like a travel agent, right? So you don't sit there and you say to someone, oh, I've created this trip for you to go to England because I think you should go there. You have all those conversations with people first. Who are you? What do you like? What's your budget? Where do you want to go on that itinerary? This itinerary we can't change for them. But what we can do is say, here's some options for you. And you still choose. So we're not taking the decision process away from them. And I think when you do get that cancer diagnosis, you feel that that's what's taken away. Well, that's how I felt, was you can't decide because like you're told you have to have this operation, you have to have this is what will help you survive. So to be able to do it in a bit of a different way, to say we're supportive, but not, because you do sometimes feel that just the easy things in life that you normally make decisions on become very difficult when you have those other challenges you're facing. So we become that sort of, you know, I don't know, crutch, I suppose, for people to just say, if you need us, we're here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And in terms of, because I what's the number of people who would need that kind of support in WA on an annual basis, and how many get it?
I don't know. That's a really tough one, and you know, sometimes sadly we have to say no to some people, and it really is hard because I get the struggle, and the struggle's real. The people will ring us and say, you know, I live locally and I can't afford the petrol, or I can't afford this and I can't afford that. And we have to look at that and go, what we can't be is just a taxi service. We can't be that. There's a lot of that out there, because from an insurance point of view, that puts us into a category of an Uber. And boy, do they go through the roof with that. So it has to be a little more than that. And so it's those stories behind the reason why they need that extra support that we have to look at. So to say how many in Western Australia, like I say, to see the growth, I suppose, from having one person, one car over 4 years for 69 people to then go 2 cars and 13 people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge growth.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes people don't necessarily want us to take them
Mm-hmm.
to their appointment. They may just need that assistance with accommodation.
Mm-hmm.
So there are 2 lodges here in Perth. Cancer lodges are constantly full. So then that gives people absolute, like, they're terrified. Then where do I stay? Where do I go? I mean, last year we had a man that came from the Pilbara in the weather like now. So it was this time last year. And he had to be discharged from hospital because they needed the beds. And he just said, it's okay, I'm used to sleeping on the streets. And it was like, he had 1% left on his battery. So I rang one of the hotels and I said, look, we're trying to source out who's going to pay what, who's going to do whatever, but can I please send him to the hotel to at least charge his phone so he's got connection to people? And the hotel said, no, we're not going to do that. And I said, oh. He said, we're going to put them in the room. He said, well, he's going in the room. I said, but I haven't sourced out yet. He said, he's going in the room. So, you know, to do that, how many people are out there that we don't know about? Don't know. And also, it's getting our word out there to people to let them know that if they do need to come to Perth, whether they want accommodation, they might be driving and they might have support, but they can't get into the lodges to say, come and look for us. We have this, option. Yes, they might be some out-of-pocket expenses, but it's a lot less than if they had to pay for normal accommodation. Then let us help you find that accommodation. Yeah.
What's happening from here from now in the future in terms of what are the expansion plans for you to add more volunteers, more fleets in the, and there's more capacity to grow? What's the plans of the future?
Yeah, I think our first plan is to try to get bricks and mortar now. Just a little place, something very, we don't need anything fancy. I actually want to call it the Hangout. And for that reason, that when people do come to Perth, and once they're in their treatment schedule, some people might not have treatment every day, it might be every second day. So it's about, then we can say to them, come and just hang out with us. Come and play cards, come and play a game of Scrabble, whatever it is, and cards and, or, whatever. So that would be the focus for now. Potentially then, yes, more cars, more volunteers. Probably more volunteers first, and the reason I say that is, people, particularly when they're volunteering, it's their time that I say to them, your life and your family are your priority. And doing this, I know it's extremely rewarding, which it is, but they still need to be able to fulfill their life, because when you're dealing with people a lot with very traumatic, things happening and sometimes end-of-life experiences, if they immerse themselves too much into it, then we've got ourselves another issue to deal with. So being able to spread it and then maybe doubling up people. So then you've got a buddy with you as well, to talk and debrief, all that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Are similar services available in other states or only in WA? You're thinking of, you're planning to go to East Coast as well?
It's a possibility, yes, but I think we'd probably want to cement it here first. Yeah.
And
Someone has asked about that, so yeah.
no, there will be similar, or have you observed that similar kind of services are available on the East Coast?
There's been some I've seen, but not quite what we do. And when I say that is that they may do the drop-off and pick-ups to appointment, but they're not necessarily sitting with them in the waiting room. So for me, it was that waiting room experience. So when people go in for treatment, I mean, I remember one time I went, there was a lady that came here, she had 43 lesions on her brain, and she was on the table for 3.5 hours having radiation. And I sat in the waiting room. And so for her to come out of the waiting room and have someone there knowing that she had that, I'm not sure that others would do that. They may drop her off and come back and pick her up. Yeah, I don't know. And, you know, often they might have a partner or a child or someone like that that's with them. So to be comforting them while they're having treatment. So there's lots that are similar, but we're just a little bit different.
I want to add, if you can, play the song as part of this podcast in conclusion,
Sure.
if you're comfortable with
Yeah.
that. But in conclusion, the question before we play the song, what's the legacy you plan to leave? You're dying, but I'm thinking, what the legacy the Blue Dot Army wants to leave? What's the legacy should be, or what's the aspirational legacy?
Yeah, it's that's another part of the strategy moving forward, is that it is at the moment sort of, you know, something that I created, a dream, and we have to then actually work to sort of phase me out of that so it does continue. And by that then maybe, you know, me personally, I become the ambassador to it, and then we create that. But I think once we get that bricks and mortar and we get settled, then that's the next step for the next phase, you know, the next phase of the next 5 years, because it's something that, you know, seeing how much of a difference it's making for people, I would love for it to continue. You know, I started a program called Change 500. First of all, thinking if we had 500 people donate $100 a year, that would be great. But looking at now what's happened, I want to make it for people to help us change the cancer experience for 500 people. We're almost there. So what do we do after that? We're just going to add a zero.
Yeah,
we're going to keep going.
Yeah.
And sadly, you know, that target will probably get reached early as well. So the idea would be then is to bring someone in to start to manage it, to keep this going, to build our little army, and just be that support group when people need us, you know. But we get a lot of people that are repeat now that come back, and they come straight back through to us.
Lovely.
Yeah. So it is. It's the best job I've ever had. I have to say, the best.
But you used to use the skills of being a travel agent.
Well, I still do that. That's a little part which it actually works out well, because I still do a little bit of the travel side of it. And for me, it works because I know I need to also look after me to keep doing what I do on this side. So I do these little breaks every so often, mini breaks. And yeah, like I said, it keeps me in the industry so that I can keep the rapport with hotels and different people going. So
Lovely. Thank you for your time, Crystal, today. Thanks a lot for the stories you have told. Very powerful, and I'm sure that I can talk to you for another couple of hours if you start telling stories of all people.
Oh, yeah.
But thanks a lot for your time today.
Oh, thank you. It's been amazing. I love talking anything about what we do and Blue Dot, how we can help people.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.